episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And when it comes to human behavior experts and psychologists, you're not going to find a better panel anywhere on planet Earth. So here we go. Another disturbing and distressing story. 2 weeks ago, 13-year-old Maddie Soto, she disappears in the Orlando area. It prompted a statewide missing child alert. Officials sadly confirmed that her body was later found in rural Osceola County, not far from where Susan Constantine is sitting, and that was just days after she was first reported missing. Stephan Sterns, the mother's boyfriend, Jennifer Soto's mother, is now the prime suspect in Madeline's disappearance, and he's accused of moving her body in the morning hours of Monday, February 26th, after killing this young girl in Kissimmee. That is all according to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. The medical examiner's office is in the process, or maybe has already determined the cause of death, but we have not officially found that out. And one of the questions that is being asked by just about everyone across the board when it comes to this story is, did Jennifer Soto play a role? The mother, one guest who I'm about to introduce, says he doesn't think so from the body language. Others say yes, 100%. So we'll see how this all plays out. Another amazing panel. Bottom left, in the purple, Dr. Joni Johnston. She is a forensic psychologist, a private investigator, and a crime writer. What a trifecta. As a practicing psychologist, she's worked in medium maximum security prisons for the Board of Parole, for the Superior Court of San Diego, and as a workplace investigator of misconduct allegations during harassment, discrimination, and violence. She is the author of Serial Killers, 101 Questions True Crime Fans Asks. 101 Questions True Crime Fans Ask. So that is the book, Serial Killers. Buy it, read it, learn it. That's what we talk about here in the true crime genre. Next up, bottom right, Dr. G and I getting over a huge UFC fight. I got to get out of the fight business. It's too taxing on me. Watch, I mean, not to fight, but just to watch. Too much for me. Dr. J.P. Garrison, he earned a PsyD in clinical psychology from the Georgia School of Professional Psychology. He also has an MBA. He's been cited for his expertise in psychology in numerous media outlets, including Business Insider, Forbes, Vice, Huffington Post, the list goes on. And he hosts his own very successful YouTube channel, Dr. G Explains. And so far, he says Jennifer Soto here's kosher. We'll ask him why. Last but not least, in the all black, Susan Constantine is one of the nation's leading jury consultants. She's also a body language and communications expert. She's the owner of the Human Behavior Lab. She's been on all the shows, Dateline, Today, Fox and Friends, and the list goes on and on. Just going around the horn here. Susan Constantine, this happened in your hometown, Orlando. How big a story when this broke, and how heartbreaking?
Well, it was big in the sense that immediately I got a phone call from Fox 35. I do a lot of work for Fox 35. I covered the Casey Anthony and George Zimmerman case too. And they're like, we have this video of this missing person's boyfriend and the mother. Will you please analyze this video? Of course, they don't tell me, what they think, but it was obvious that they thought something was really up. So I analyzed the video, and yes, it's been very huge here in Central Florida. Everybody's wondering what really happened. Is the mother involved? Is the dad or is the boyfriend involved? What happened to Madeline Soto? So I jumped on the news and said, "Can you be ready in makeup, ready in 1 hour?" And I says, "Okay, here we go." So I jumped on the news, and after I looked at the video, and it was, I think that we're all going to agree, it was shocking. To me, it was glaringly obvious. In fact, so obvious that I petitioned the sheriff's office to look at the boyfriend immediately. I feel like he's a suspect in the disappearance of Madeline. So it wasn't but a day later, or I think the day later is when they had arrested him, of course, for other reasons. But anyway, yes, it's a big case here in Central Florida.
Yeah, it seems. What's in the water there, Susan? There's so many big cases that come out of Central Florida. Is there something about the area that causes this?
You know, it's crazy. I don't know what it is, but it seems like every time you turn around, and not like that, we had, the Take Care of Maya case, the Netflix big case. I went to that trial. It just keeps going. The list goes on and on. So, we've been thinking about, do we want to go move to Nantucket? I'm actually kind of considering it. Get away from all these crazy people.
Nantucket's too cold in the winter for me, but it's beautiful, and I might come visit you in the summer if you do that. Dr. Joni Johnston, your expertise is really about these serial killers, but just this kind of psychopathy. What would compel a woman's boyfriend, a man in his late 30s, to go and commit such a hideous, heinous crime? Dr. Joni, can you hear me?
Yes.
What would compel the boyfriend to do something like this? He's now the prime suspect.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. So I guess one thing that would be maybe useful to mention is I really started out my forensic career working with families in which their incest had occurred or some kind of child sexual abuse. So this is something that really did hit home for me and brought back some just really kind of traumatic memories. I mean, I can remember working with kids who had these experiences, and it was just so heartbreaking. And then to see the dynamics sometimes in the families. And there's a lot of variability in those dynamics, but it sounds like certainly if this is somebody who is sexually abusing an 11-year-old child, this is somebody who is a pedophile, basically. And so that's the first thing that pops to mind. And then you have to look at, of course, why is this person choosing to sexually abuse somebody who he's been in a relationship with as a step parent, basically, in that role, it sounds like, for a number of years. And so I think that you have those two things together. I think it's important to kind of look at that. But yeah, I mean, when you are sexually abusing somebody who hasn't reached puberty, that's kind of in a whole different ballgame, I think, than sexually abusing somebody who's older, which is, of course, horrific in and of itself.
Dr. G, you've been the contrarian so far in this case. We'll get into kind of the details when I play some of these videos. By the way, there is not a tremendous amount of new news on this case today. We were expecting maybe another court date. So what I really want to do is open this up to these best guests. We are going to show you plenty of video and have Dr. G and Susan kind of deconstruct it, but get your triple Qs in there, the question. So I know you have a question. I'll shoot down at the bottom of the chat and we'll start pumping these questions out. And keep in mind, Dr. Joni has to leave at the top of the hour. It's the fastest 90 minutes of your life right now, the 60 fastest for Joni, but we'll continue on here. Dr. G, how come you're saying you don't think the mom's involved? Everyone's asking me.
It's a good question, and it's something I've given a lot of thought to, but to give you the basics, and we'll get more into specifics as we watch the videos, but it's the things that she doesn't show that make me think that she probably doesn't actually know that she was murdered at the time. She doesn't seem to be faking emotion. She doesn't seem to be hiding emotion. From what I can tell, she's got inappropriate emotions, and that's what I think concerns people, but I don't think that necessarily means that she knew that her daughter was murdered. So I think as we get into this, I can explain why I have my doubts that she knew or was involved in any way.
I already see an awesome question. I'm going to pop up in a minute. Susan Constantine, you said that the early interviews of the mother and the boyfriend are just so important. Why the early interviews?
Because the early interviews are ones that they have not had the opportunity to reconstruct them. Now, they may have reconstructed them if she had anything to do with it or has any knowledge of it, but then they would have been able to script it. And by the time they've rehearsed it several times and talked about it, then the story starts to change. And you see that oftentimes anyone that's been charged with an offense like this, especially murder, how their stories morph. So the one that is the closest to the consciousness, the ones that literally come out of the mouth, you listen to every single word that they say and how they phrase it. And that is the most important, because then you can use that as a baseline to compare and contrast any other videos or any other statements that they make. So that first initial one is by far the most important.
Here's a comment that I wanted to bring up here. I think we're getting a tiny bit of feedback off of, I think it's Susan's mic, but Pamela Rich Properties. I'm going to toss this one back to Joni. This is interesting. I didn't catch this, but this is a great question. The boyfriend said when Maddie got out of the car, she put on her headphones. But if her phone was at home, which they also say, the hell was she listening to? Sometimes when you are creating a narrative, it doesn't always fit the reality. What do you make of this, Dr. Joni?
Well, there are so many inconsistencies that came through in both of the interviews, I think. And, we can kind of decide what we think that means, but it's hard to believe that, this guy at this point, as Susan pointed out, has not done a very good job of rehearsing whatever story he's telling, because so many of the things he says, especially then when you talk about Jen, same thing, you kind of go, what? You said this and then you said that. It's hard to believe for me that you have a middle schooler who forgets her phone. I have had 4 middle schoolers, and I can tell you they'd be pitching a fit to go back home and get it. So the fact that she left her phone at home, the fact that she plugged her earphones into what? We have no idea. So it is difficult. It's more difficult than we think it is, I think, to lie and get all those little details right. We might have the big picture. I'm going to say A, B, and C, but we're going to get those details wrong. And then, of course, the more we question, we have a chance to rehearse that. But it's still difficult because people are asking different questions, and then people forget what they said.
Dr. G, to that point, human behavior is something in the subconscious. Creating statements is basically fictional writing. They're equally hard to do, right? This is a great question, because if she didn't have her phone, it wouldn't make sense that she was listening to anything, right?
Oh, for sure. And I'm sure the Stephan Sterns, all of his stuff is questionable. There's basically nothing that he said that was on point. So I'm not surprised that he would make mistakes like that. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Susan, they're telling me that if I can get in here, I'm going to mute you. I'll have you. Oh, you're muted. Oh, you are muted. Okay, Susan, I'll just have you unmute yourself when we get to you. For those who have not been following the story closely, Madeline Soto, and again, this is her photo here. I just want to bring her up because that's what it is all about. 13 years old here. Beautiful little girl, and she's reported missing on Monday, February 26th. Initially, it was said she was dropped off by the boyfriend, Stephan Sterns, near Hunters Creek Middle School. For some reason, it wasn't at the school. It was near the school, near some church. Police went back and looked at surveillance video. There was no sighting of her near the church at the time. They say that she was there, and she was never actually dropped off. And then in a news conference, authorities went on to say that they believe Stephan Sterns was throwing items into a dumpster early that morning. Things like her backpack and school laptop were found in that dumpster. And then Stephan Sterns is seen returning to the apartment complex, and someone sees who they believe to be Maddie in that car, but she would not have been alive at that moment. Susan, what do you make of that part of the story? Is it possible that he was driving around with the body of Madeline Soto at that point? Oh, hang on a sec. I have to unmute you. I'll do it on I got you. Go ahead, Susan.
So I'm going to reveal something to you that I believe would happen. First of all, I think she was already dead at that point. And yes, she could have been in that car. And the reason why is that in one of the interviews, he says that she was sleeping most of the time. I'm going, yeah, she was sleeping. She was like dead. Okay. So the fact that he used the word sleeping there in statement analysis, you really have to examine the types of words that they use at that moment. And then I even talked to my statement. I have a team of people that are statement analysis and voice stress analysis. We analyzed all this stuff and put it together. And when we looked at the language, he missed the sleeping part. And I said, Bob, I'm texting him. I said, did you see where he said that she was sleeping in the car most of the time? What do you mean most of the time? He doesn't pick up and doesn't finish the conversation. He doesn't say that she had a conversation with him. But it was a very odd thing to say. I mean, the kid woke up, at 9 o'clock? It was already 9 o'clock. So, I mean, why wasn't this kid, was she up all night long? The birthday party, what have you? I found that to be really strange.
Yeah, so did I. Susan, I'll keep you muted. I'll mute and unmute you. Violet Muse here. Dr. G, just a flat out question here. Do you think the mom knew of the abuse, but she was not present when the murder occurred? Followed by Joni, and a lot of people have been saying this, the mother is covering up for the boyfriend. Your take is a psychologist here.
So I don't have any specific reason to believe that she did know about the abuse, but I wouldn't be shocked if that turned out to be the case, with that she didn't know about the murder. But there's no specific reason why I would say she knew about it. I think that it also seems very possible that she's very naive, or that she's very gullible, that she was easily manipulated by Stephan Sterns. So it's possible that maybe she had suspicions. Maybe she knew. That part I can't say, because that wasn't addressed specifically, but I think that would certainly seems plausible.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Joni, to you, what about this? It seems at the very least an odd relationship between Stephan Sterns, the boyfriend, and Jennifer Soto. A lot of people saying that they believe, he's a control freak, to use that psychological term, and was manipulating her. What do you make of the dynamics between the two, the dynamic between Jennifer, the mother, and her boyfriend at this point?
Well, I think this whole issue of did she know can mean a lot of different things. I think it's easy to kind of think if she either knew what was happening specifically, or she had no idea what was happening. And one of the things I saw in my work with families is how complicated it can be, in the sense that there's this thing called almost like a silent partner, which is somebody who they are getting these kind of bad feelings, or they're suspecting something, or they don't feel comfortable. They know that something is not right, but they don't want to know what it is. And so it's almost like they choose to ignore what's going on. And for some reason, that child, which is heartbreaking to think about, that child picks up on that somehow it's vitally important that I not tell mom. Now, she may have told her mom, and her mom may have said, I don't believe you, which is another terrible scenario. But let's say for a minute that she didn't tell her mom, because she's protecting her mom, because on some level she understands that mom needs this guy, right? That would be devastating to her. So is that a situation where mom knows what's happening, completely what's happening? You can say yes or no, right? But I think there is a continuum there. And the other thing I would say is how often what I would see, and we don't know in this case if it's true or not, this kind of multi-generational thing that would just get passed down from generation to generation. And I had some moms come in who did exactly the right thing when their child finally told them. They kicked the guy out of the house. They got a court order. They were prosecuting or whatever. And then of course, in the course of therapy, sometimes they would tell me, oh, I was sexually abused as a child as well. And they had no idea that this was happening until their daughter spoke. And yet when they're telling me these things, I, as somebody, fortunately, who was not in that situation, it seemed like there were so many red flags there. And yet that person didn't see them at all. So I think it's just so complicated sometimes. Now, all of this doesn't help Maddie. I mean, the outcome is the same. But I think, and there's no excuse, right, for a child who's been murdered and who just celebrated her 13th birthday. But I think this idea of did she know, and how did she know, and what did she know, can be pretty complicated.
Yeah. Lisa Mona here. This is a great point. I've got kids a little bit younger. She would not have forgotten her phone the day after her birthday. She would want to show her friends her gifts. That is for sure. Although I got my son, or someone got my son, not me, I don't know who got him, a little racetrack thing that I had to put together for him. I got the old COE saying, be a good dad, and wasn't exactly in those words, but she guilted me into building this racetrack yesterday. And he played with it for about 2 minutes. But I think a 13-year-old girl with a cell phone, 1,000% would bring that phone in the next day to show it off. And lo and behold, there was no phone. And I don't think there was any Maddie either. PSS, the Philadelphia shoulder surgeon. Back to Dr. Joni here. Can you talk about your experience with the uninvolved parent when they don't believe the child? And then it's followed by this comment. A lot of the time, the child is just not believed, which is a horrific thought if they're experiencing abuse. Your take on this?
Both those comments are just so profound in so many ways. And I think most often what I saw is that the parent, again, they couldn't tolerate the idea of losing that relationship. And so they just communicated to that child, and they communicated sometimes verbally in terms of like not believing or you're lying or whatever. They just they basically chose their own needs over the needs of their child. And that was so heartbreaking, because one of the things that the research shows, and that was certainly true in my experience, is that while sexual abuse in of itself is horrific, the response when a child finally discloses can either do tremendous damage if they aren't believed, or it can be a great facilitator in terms of the healing process. If you have a parent who believes a child immediately and takes the appropriate action, it doesn't take away what's happened, but it helps them, it validates that child and their experience and what's happened to them. And the reverse is so true. It's like it really is like, I was gonna say double the trauma, but it's not. It's like multiplied. When you have a child who's experiencing abuse, they disclose it to a parent, and the parent basically says, either you're lying, I don't believe you, or quit making things up, or whatever they tell that child.
Nikki Cuds here. Does the panel, i.e. Susan Constantine, think she was murdered the night of her party? The mother wasn't there. And I'll add to that, Susan, a lot of people believe that 13th birthday was the trigger for this murder for one reason or another. What do you believe?
That's really interesting, because when I first saw the video and I texted the reporter and I said, what's going on with mom and daughter? It seems like there's some friction there. Even though we didn't see the daughter, you could sense this little sharp tone that mom had, like this sense of agitation. And when she spoke in these little, almost like sound bites, drove her to school. We did this, we did that, almost like these little sound bites. But there was a little edge to her tone that kind of set me off a little strange. And also, her mom wasn't there. Now, keep in mind, I was a single mother, but I still wouldn't, for years, I would not have missed my own kid's birthday party. I mean, that's like a top priority. For some reason, she did. So I think that the opportunity lent itself to it. And remember, now she allegedly has been abused by this guy for over 2 years. So this was an opportunity. Who knows what happened? There's speculation. Maybe she was pregnant. Maybe mom was wondering. Who knows? We don't know. But overall, I think that to answer a lot of everyone else's question too is, do I think that mom was involved? I don't know that yet. There's not enough discovery or intel for us to tell us that. But what I do believe is that there's a reason why she's covering it up. And like both the doctors here, I think would agree with this, that the fear of that getting caught, or the fear of disappointing their mother, or whatever it is, could be the very good reason why it was never really shared. So I think mom has some part of it, and she's covering for the boyfriend. I just don't know why.
And I think that's what everyone's trying to figure out. Back to Susan on this. She's not an attorney, and I don't know that she knows, but she might, because she covers a lot of cases in Florida. There's Florida Bill 273 that they're not going to let the autopsy findings of children out under the age of 13. I believe that is a law in Florida. I didn't understand this bill. Do you think, Susan, that we will find out, that the manner of death, cause of death is, the manner of death is homicide. The cause of death, we don't know yet. Is this the sort of thing that we will find out from the media?
I think we're going to find out what the manner of death is, because, think about Casey Anthony, when little Kaylee was murdered. I mean, Dr. G, I saw her testify. I was in that courtroom, and she determined the manner of death was homicide by the reason that it was hidden in the woods and the tape was put across this child's mouth, suffocation. So that was what she believed was the manner of death. So I'm not sure what that bill is, because I am not an attorney. I'm a trial consultant, but I'm not familiar with that bill. But In the case of Casey Anthony, we did find out that not actually how she was murdered, because there was nothing really left of the body, but there was still a finding it was homicide.
It's my belief we will find out, even if it's against the law in the state of Florida. The media will get an answer one way or the other. I'm sure it will come out, although it'll take time. And I'll tell you, I'm surprised. It was a very quiet weekend with this case, and no news today. People are kind of sitting with bated breath, wondering what is the development going to be with Jennifer Soto, if any. And I think things will start to move again, probably tomorrow or midweek. We're going to be back on this case tomorrow with Tim Jansen, of course, a criminal defense attorney out of Tallahassee, and Dave Nutting, a retired homicide detective out of Orlando. So they'll be on tomorrow. And by the way, that is 5 p.m. And Scott Peterson is back in court tomorrow. So 2 for Tuesday tomorrow, 5 o'clock, Maddie Soto, 7 o'clock, Scott Peterson. He is claiming he is innocent, and he's going to get heard before a judge in California tomorrow. I know Ted Rollins from Court TV is going to be here, and I'm working on getting Laura Engel. The two of them are two original reporters on that case. So stay tuned for that. Aria Dakota Grimaldi Lane, to you, Dr. G, this is a very disturbing question, but a necessary one. If the mom wasn't involved, who was taking the photos and filming the videos? They were taken away in a way that he couldn't do it himself. It has been revealed that on Stephan's phone, look at this, Joe Jackalone coming on, a friend of the show, an amazing investigative mind. But back to you, Dr. G. It has been revealed that Stephan Sterns had images, disturbing images on his phone, and apparently someone filmed them other than himself. Does that give you reason for pause?
I mean, it gives me reason to think that somebody else is involved. I don't have any specific reason to think that it's the mother, but I'd have to know more to be concerned that it'd specifically be her. But yeah, I mean, clearly, if there's somebody else involved, that's a big concern that this investigation is far from over.
The man with the best voice in all of podcasting, Dr. G, and he's the voice of reason. Sounds like a homicide detective. Homicide detectives are never willing to go down the road if there is no evidence. And Dr. G, he is careful. You can tell, but he does think right now that at least that the mother is kind of collateral damage here. Joe Jackalone, why so many inconsistencies in her stories? I'm going to throw this to Dr. Joni. Even though I think this is a rhetorical question, Joe Jackalone, of course, a retired NYPD sergeant, cold case investigator for the NYPD. But why so many inconsistencies in her stories, Dr. Joni? She can't remember simple facts. Her timeline is way off. Is it because she had something to do with the murder, or is it because she's being controlled so much by this guy that she's terrified? What do you think? Or a combination?
I definitely think there were so many inconsistencies in her story, and I definitely think she's not telling the truth. But I'm like Dr. G. I'm not willing to say that means she was actively involved in her murder at this point. I don't see any clear evidence of that. But just some of the language she uses, and again, I'm speaking in front of two body language experts. But I don't think you even have to be a language expert in some of the things that she says. And when you talk about when you say things like "we dropped her off at school" one minute, and then you say that your partner dropped them off the next minute, right? That doesn't compute. Some of the language she talks about, they have dogs that would sniff her out. I mean, some of the things that she says, it's like she's talking about somebody that she's a sheriff or a law enforcement officer using the lingo of somebody who's investigating this. So there's a lot of things that are inconsistent in her story. So there's clearly that she's telling something that somebody told her to say, or she's trying to protect, him, what he's done. I would not in any way say that what she said, how she acted or what she said was believable in her interviews.
And Dr. Joni, right back to you on this one from Super Planner Girl. Somewhere I heard that she said when she turned 13, she was going to go live in the forest. That breaks my heart. This poor little girl. Joni, I think it's an obvious answer, but a question that has to be asked. When a child this age, and they say that she was being abused in this manner, a horrific manner, for over 2 years, Is that something that anyone ever can recover from? Or, was she already going to experience, a lifetime full of agony because of what this monster did to her?
So look, there are two parts of it. I think, children are resilient, and I have seen people with the most horrendous trauma in their childhoods who, got into therapy, got lots of help, and they recovered from it. I would never say that a child has been so traumatized that they can't recover and have a happy and successful life. Number one. Number two, when we look at, kind of the level of trauma, we do know that, sexual abuse that's repeated over time by a person in a position of trust, particularly within the family, is one of the most traumatic things you can experience. And the fact that she obviously, we don't know that she told anybody. I mean, that's the thing that's so heartbreaking to me. And her talking about going to live in the woods, it's like, couldn't she tell her grandparent or a teacher or a friend, or, wasn't there one person in her life that she could confide in? That really does break my heart. I could see why she'd want to go live in the woods.
Side Barbie here. It's so heartbreaking. Dr. G, this is going to come up in the sound I play today, and I always wait too long and the COE gets annoyed with me, so I'm going to start playing it in a moment. But Dr. G, how do you explain the mom switching? COE, do you do that to me on purpose, from we to he? I remember the pronouns. So at one point, she's explaining the story, and she says, we dropped him off, he dropped her off, and she does switch pronouns. How do you account for that?
So there's a couple of things that could. She's not a very precise communicator is one thing. She doesn't seem to be very skilled in that way. She comes across as a bit peculiar. And the one thing she doesn't seem to be inconsistent with, I don't think she ever said, I was in the car and I saw her get out. She never put herself in that situation, but she does go between we and saying he did that. To me, that was an odd way to phrase it, but she's not an attorney. She's not somebody who speaks for a living, from what I can tell. So it could just be that she's not very precise with her language, or that she sees herself and Stephan as a unit. So she oftentimes says we, but yeah, it's weird though, no question. But that was probably the strangest thing. And I think it's possible there's alternate explanations.
Here's a timeline. Maddie, Maddi. I think this was the AI that did it incorrectly, but February 25th, Maddie celebrates her 13th birthday with the family. On the 26th, 8:19 a.m., video shows Stephan Sterns returning to the apartment complex with Madeline Soto visible in the car. Investigators believe she was already deceased, which is just sickening. February 28th, police arrest Sterns. That's 2 days later. By the way, capital sexual battery in Florida carries the death penalty, which is good in this case. Sterns refuses to talk to police about Madeline Soto. He asks for an attorney. March 1st, law enforcement confirms Madeline Soto's body was found in Osceola County. That is a remote area off of Hickory Tree Road. March 1st, Sterns is transferred from the Orange County Jail to the Osceola County Jail, and that is the timeline of events. Let's play this. This is Stephan Sterns in an exclusive with WFTV. This is once she is declared missing, before he's arrested, before she is discovered, her body, that is. Here we go.
We don't know where she can be, and we're scared. We just want her home.
I'm going to stop it right there, because Dr. G, up to this point, Dr. G, what are you seeing? I'm going to have Susan weigh in.
Well, obviously his eyes are red. I don't see any tears coming down from them, but I think he wants to appear as though he's crying. He sits very still, like he's hiding. That's oftentimes something that we see. He doesn't have a lot of body movement. I mean, that's just so far. I mean, I know I've seen more of this interview, but yeah, that's about what we're seeing thus far.
I'm going to pick it back up, and then we'll let Susan weigh in on the back end.
We don't know where she can be, and we're scared. We just want her home.
Are you, in a sense, blaming yourself?
It's hard not to.
Why?
I dropped her off early. I could have waited longer. She looked okay. She was walking towards the school when I saw her. It was like any other day, so I went on with my day. It's hard not to blame myself.
Susan, hang on one time. I'm going to unmute you here. Susan, he says, it's hard not to blame myself. Is that some sort of
Form
I
of
don't
it.
know, some sort of admission or confession that's covered by a blanket there.
Yeah, but sometimes liars will do that because they think that sounds more truthful. But when I'm watching him, to Dr. G's point, is we don't see the tears. Yes, the eyes look like they're a little bloodshot, but they're not. You're not seeing what we call sadness, or he's got part of his forehead already covered. But you don't see any eyebrows pulling up. You don't see any lines or concern, tension, or anything in his upper forehead, and that's a big revealer for me. I also hear his voice. I feel like it's being pushed. In other words, he's as a forceful way to appear as if he is stressed, but it doesn't appear to be authentic. It feels pushed. I call them pushed emotions. And so we look at clusters, right? We look at, does the emotions fit the words, and can we cluster some things together, and in at least two channels, at least three different indicators, and these deep breaths. I don't really see any sort of fight or flight types of responses in him. He's shaking his head no and yes, and he's detaching, he's looking down. So there's a lot of incongruency here, but you have to, like with body language, and I'm a body language expert too, but it's really only 74% of the puzzle, right? So when you're including that with facial expressions, you have to take into account their voice inflection, their tone, their rhythm, their pace. You have to look at their physiology. I don't see anything in there that I feel like is really truly felt when you understand how a person emotes, and the emotional emotion spilling out of them or leaking out. It's forced to me. I feel like I'm really looking at a really bad Amber Heard.
Amber Heard. Yeah. Amber Fry is tomorrow. That's Scott Peterson.
Amber Fry, yeah. Amber Heard. So anyway, when I looked at all of this, we compare a lot of things. We take the piece of each sentence, what they're saying, and yes, there's missing pronouns, or the I versus the we, and not taking ownership when you say we versus I, and then it switches around. So why is that? Okay, all we need to do is that's like a point of interest, right? We kind of put that off to the side. We'd like to see if there's other things. We can keep going through the statement till we start to see more inconsistencies, and then you can come to more of a hypothesis. Do you think this guy's involved? And yes, of course, I think he is. I think he's the murderer.
Dr. G, what about looking at this with no audio? Is that something that you do sometimes? Will you look at a soundbite with no audio because you're really just reading the body language? And if so, what do you see as you're watching this?
I mean, I don't typically do that just for fun, but I could do that because I can tell you it's certainly more interesting when you've got more context. So, but yeah, I mean, you can tell if somebody's feeling stressed or somebody looks angry or sad or any of those things. I mean, I already know what he's saying here, so admittedly that does color how I probably interpret this, but you're not seeing any real emotion here, that's for sure. I'm not seeing a guy who's sad and distraught or fearful, really. He looks relieved right there when he's talking about this part of I blame myself or whatever. I think he thought that was a good line, so I think he was relieved he got to say that. So to me, the only thing I saw was a little bit of relief as he said that, not much else.
Dr. Joni, just wondering what, if anything, you gleaned from that sound bite. And then this question for you, how did they change her birthday party? And yet the mother was not at this birthday party, which seems very odd. I don't really know all the ins and outs of the family dynamics. By the way, she has a biological father, of course, named Tyler Wallace. And I have a couple of photos of him that people sent, but I just didn't want to post it out of respect for his privacy. It seems like he is going through obviously a very, very hard time, but it appeared that he's very close with her from the photos that I saw. But what about the fact that the mom's not at the birthday party? And first, if you just want to comment on that soundbite we just saw.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me, and it's something I've noticed, and I interview a lot of inmates who've been convicted of violent offenses. And one of the things that I do notice, and I've noticed over time, is sometimes when they're talking to me and engaging with me about various things, and I start asking them about their offense, for example, they'll break eye contact frequently and look down or look away. And, that's different from how they're engaging with me about other things, whether mental health treatment or how they're doing, behind bars and those kinds of things. And it seemed to me, especially in watching it without the sound, when we were watching it with the sound before, I didn't notice that when he was talking about, we wish wanted to come home or we really miss her, it seemed like when he was saying those kinds of things, he would break eye contact with the person who was interviewing him. And I thought that was interesting. And kind of a tell for me as an interviewer, as opposed to a body language expert. And then I have to say, I don't know what to make either of the birthday party. I'm with Susan. I mean, we all are, many of us have been single parents at some point in time and understand schedules and those kinds of things. So I'm never going to throw stones at somebody who has to work to put, food on the table. It does seem odd to me, though, that as a parent, you couldn't find a way to change shifts with somebody or work a different one or whatever. I don't know what to make of it. I would like to know, because that does seem significant that somebody could not or would choose not to either or, get that day off to celebrate their daughter becoming a teenager, which is a huge deal for parents oftentimes.
And that's a question a lot of people are asking. Lily Rose is one of them. By the way, shout out to Jersey, Jen Castaldi, who's going through a tough time. Lily Rose, did the mother need his money to pay the rent, or was he living off of her financially? I just don't think we know the answer yet, but I do think that, the economics probably played some role in some way. Either she was beholden to him, meaning Stephan Sterns, or or he was controlling her because she had the money, perhaps. So, and wanted to dominate and get that money to survive. Like, we all need some money to, as Joni just said, to put food on the table. Analytical Blarney AB, friend of the show, wouldn't you schedule your child's party around your work schedule because you wanted to be there? Susan Constantine, human behavior expert, your take.
Well, first of all, my kids would have crucified me if I wasn't there for their 13th birthday, right? Because as a mom, and even as a dad, but I can speak as a mother, my 13-year-old kid, she's already reminding me of it like a week or 2 weeks beforehand. What do we have planned? You have all that stuff already done. It's the 13th birthday when she becomes a young woman, right? So this is a huge deal. So you've got friends, or you've got a party, and you got birthday cakes, you got balloons, and you've got all these things that we do, and invitations that we send out. I just have a hard time understanding, first of all, why these women leave their children with a boyfriend or even a stepfather alone yet. I mean, every time you turn around, you keep hearing the same stories again. It's a boyfriend that was there, or killed one of the children, or it's a scene of opportunity. This guy, I think, is a pedo anyway, and he was just waiting for the right opportunity, and who knows why mom wasn't there. I just have a hard time, just as from a moral, ethical point of view, I have a hard time with it as a mom.
Carol C here, brave for coming forward with this comment to Dr. Joni. She says, I was molested by my friend's father. I never told my parents in fear that I would ruin everything we did as a family in my community. I felt so afraid of what would happen if my dad found out. This speaks volumes, I think, to the way children feel, right, Dr. Joni?
It really does. And thank you for sharing that, Carol. And I've heard so many stories like that, parents just feeling a need to protect their families in some respect, or they don't want their dad to go off, or what would my dad do if he found out? Would he hurt this other person? All those kinds of things. I mean, it just amazes me how often children are protective or afraid to tell their family for lots of different reasons.
Coffee cake here. This is a question that's come up a few times, Dr. G. I know you can diagnose someone without seeing them, but any indication that she may have Asperger's or be on the autism spectrum, the mother, that is, from what you've seen.
So I don't want to speculate on a specific diagnosis, but there is something that feels disconnected. Her affect, the way her emotions are, do seem at times inappropriate, and so she does seem like somebody who it's possible that if she does have some type of diagnosis, that's what Stephan Sterns identified. Obviously not the literal diagnosis, but he identified that she was vulnerable, and maybe that's why this situation played out the way that it did. What's also possible is if she really was involved with this, I think what I have a hard time with is she would have to be such a monster. There would have to be something so fundamentally wrong that it would be on a scale that we have very rarely seen. It would like Lori Vallow type of bizarreness about her. But yeah, as far as there's got to be something that explains her inappropriate behavior. I think that people are looking at a lot of her behavior through a lens as though she's just sort of your average person. Maybe she isn't.
That is a good point. And Lori Vallow crazy is a very high level of crazy, that's for sure. Roxanne A, back to you, Dr. G. I did notice in a lot of these sound bites, and we're going to play them, and it takes me a while to get cranking here, especially on a Monday. But the mom had a hard time, and so did the boyfriend. Don't really hear them say Maddie's name. Just the pronoun is used. We dropped her off. But we don't see them invoking the child's name. Is that some sort of telltale sign or nothing to think about?
It could be, but like I said, she may be sort of a strange communicator, and there could be a variety of reasons for that. I'll actually pay attention to that when we watch this clip. I don't remember that specifically.
All right, so let's go to the second clip of Stephan Sterns, and then we'll play some of the mother. This is another clip of the boyfriend prior to his arrest and being the prime suspect in this case.
It's a living nightmare. Day started off like any other. And I just want to wake up and just get hit with waves of the reality just it's setting in. As soon as it got dark last night, we started falling apart because we knew it wasn't going to come to an end. And now we're going on 24 hours and still nothing. Just conflicting reports here and there. People say they see this or that. None of it's conclusive and none of it's helpful. We just want a baby girl back.
Tom, any questions?
Susan, I'm going to play this without the sound. He says at one point, we knew it wasn't going to come to an end. And I feel like that is almost some sort of admission where he's feeling remorseful for himself, kind of admitting to the reality. But what did you make of this soundbite?
Well, this is a really good point. And one of the questions that was asked is, do you ever watch the videos without sound? Yes. So what I do, just so that the viewers out there can do the same thing that we're doing, is I take the video, put it on rev.com, I transcribe it, and I watch the video without sound first. Well, excuse me, at first I run the whole thing through with sound. Then I turn it around and I do it without sound. And all I do is I just watch the movements of the face. I note that if there's like something that shift or changed, I stop it, replay it, put the audio on to see what was spoken at that time to create some sort of link. So that's important. And then what are the words he uses? Again, what we're seeing here, I think that it is possible that whatever happened that night before, something did get out of control, could have been, right? Just based on his language. I do see a very slight pinching of the eyebrow, kind of coming up slightly. It's a little bit of could be remorse. You can see it right there. All right, right there when you pinch it. Now that could be a form of concentration, but I think that he might feel regretful for what happened. It could be that what we're seeing. But again, you see him dabbing his nose. I feel like it's Alex Murdoch. You know, he's got all this coming out of here, but there's nothing coming out of here. And then I know that Dr. G and I've been trained in this, right? I mean, this is what we do for a living. We know what to look for as in clusters. So what this does is it just tells us it doesn't match up. Why doesn't it match up? We have to get more information. We don't jump to quick conclusions without gathering more intel. And you have to understand the context. And the only way of doing it is playing it over and over and over again. And I'm sure that Dr. G would agree with me. We'll play it back and forth, and you'll get something new every time you look at it. You'll be finding, and it's almost kind of like constant discovery.
Mm-hmm. Dr. G, speaking of that, in this particular clip, I asked Orlando retired homicide detective Dave Nutting, who's coming on tomorrow. He said from an interview standpoint or interrogation standpoint, this guy is making no eye contact. He's looking down the entire time. Is that something that struck you in this particular clip?
I pay less attention to eye contact. I mean, it matters, but at the same time, anxious people tend to not make eye contact either. So I'm a little. I look at that, as Susan was saying, in clusters, right? Like if that comes with certain other things. So yeah, the eye contact isn't great, but it's more the fake. I hate it when people fake cry. It drives me nuts because it's so bad. It doesn't even look like they're crying, and it's like no tears. He's trying to make the sounds of crying, basically. So that overshadowed everything else to me because it irritates me so badly. But yeah, the lack of eye contact may be meaningful, but I don't focus as much on that as the other aspects of it, actually.
And then we're going to get to Jennifer Soto, the mom, in a minute. Dr. Joni, here's a red flag from Victor Polanco, and this is a good one. In a TV interview, Stephan Sterns, mentioned that Madeline was a good girl. He said it was in the past tense, making it clear that she had died. What about the subconscious in, it just conversationally to slip up like that and put something in the past tense?
Again, I think it just reflects how difficult it is to maintain a narrative and be consistent. Because again, no matter what story you're telling or what you've decided to tell, if you're not telling the truth, and things that other people don't know, and you're trying to keep them from knowing those things, then you have to remember all kinds of things like that. I've got to always remember to talk about this person in the present tense. I've got to make sure I remember to say it this way. I've got to do A, B, and C. and it just becomes difficult to do. And I don't see either Jen or Stephan being particularly skilled, at lying in this context.
Dr. Joni, this is right in your wheelhouse, I think. From Allie, what makes a woman choose a man over their own child? It seems so counterintuitive to me. It is more likely that the mom was abused, or simply a cold-hearted narcissist who puts her needs first. And by the way, we don't know much about Jennifer Soto. We don't know. Maybe she was abused in her own in her own childhood, in her own life. We don't know. But your take on this?
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I think it is better to talk more in generalities than to talk specifically about this particular case, because there's a lot of things that we don't know. In terms of answering your question, I would say, sometimes it's A and sometimes it's B. So sometimes I think you have someone who, again, I mentioned earlier, this kind of multi-generational trauma where you have a mom who maybe was neglected by her own mom or her own family. And that's the way she's learned to parent. And so she just transfers that parenting and that lack of attachment to her own children, because that's how you become a parent. Or she was abused, and so she misses some of the signals. So a lot of times I think there is this multi-generational trauma, and it really is a reflection of that person's own wounds that are not healed or not dealt with, and they're now passing on to their children. And then, of course, anybody who's watched 3 Datelines knows that there are people, mothers and fathers, who clearly don't care about their children. They're objects to them, or they're inconveniences to them, or they want to get rid of them, or whatever. So you can find, I think, in my experience, I see much more of the A than the B, but I've certainly encountered, people who I felt like should never be parents because they didn't have the capacity to attach to anything or anyone.
Susan, this has come up a lot, that Jen Soto looks bombed out on meds from after she FaceTimed Maddie. She didn't want to wake up until Stephan Sterns turned up saying he had taken Maddie to school, and look, she forgot her phone. The point is that during some of these TV interviews, they think she looks like she's heavily medicated. I'm obviously not a good determiner of that, but did you notice anything that made you think maybe she is being medicated on some sort of drugs?
That was not one of the things that never even came in my mind. And I'm not saying that she couldn't have, but if she were, that's not a time to be asking all these probative questions, because when they're under the influence, they're on drugs, or whether it's prescribed or not, they're not at whatever state they're in. It is an altered state. So you have to be really careful about when you're interviewing people. If you do suspect that she was on drugs, or even was drunk. I didn't see that. I didn't hear slurring of her words. I saw a lot of, grammatical errors. I heard a lot of mispronoun usage. I literally could break this into from line item to line item and just rip this thing apart. Okay. And I have. So there, when you start to see that sort of consistency, if she was taking something for an antidepressant, I don't know. There's no way for us to know that without taking a blood test or a breathalyzer test. We don't know what we don't know. We just know what we know, right? And that's what we work off of.
By the way, if you haven't checked out True Crime with the Sarge, Joe Jackalone is in the chat today. Check out his show. Rising Tide lifts all ships, as Steve Cohen likes to say. And retired NYPD Sergeant Joe Jackalone is a good guy with very interesting takes because of his work experience working in New York City for all those years. Let's take a look here at, let me just get rid of this comment. Doing it all here. I'm like a piano player on multiple keyboards. But here is an interview with Jennifer Soto, just her. And then I'm going to play some with the background. But this is one of the first ones that she did. And keep in mind, Susan Constantine says it's important to look at these first interviews before they've had a chance. If they're going to rehearse something or make stuff up, this is a good chance to get them before they've done that. This is an early interview with Jennifer Soto. Here we go.
Spotted walking by the church, by the middle school on the cameras. They saw her hang out in the parking lot for a little bit and then get up and leave. They didn't see a vehicle or anything else. They just saw her walk away around 9 a.m. heading towards the school, but she never made it.
What has the school said? Have you given in contact with the school?
Yes, that they're doing everything they can. They've given me all their resources. The principals called me. They've looked at their cameras. I don't think they've caught anything on the cameras is too far away from the sidewalk. Everything is too grainy, so they can't see specific faces. But they've looked. I'm just waiting to hear anything else from them.
Is this normal behavior?
Not
to
at all.
just not show up or call or text or anything?
Not at all, no.
So Dr. Joni, I know you have to go in a second. She does seem very disconnected here. Does she appear that way to you?
She appears disconnected to me, but she also appears to be stressed to me. I mean, there's an underlying feeling that this is somebody who's barely holding it together, at least as far as I can tell.
Courtney H. says, could some of her inconsistency be because she's afraid of the truth of her boyfriend? She wrote husband, but I think she meant boyfriend, Stephan Sterns, and she's fearful of him. So she's kind of holding it back a little bit. Do you think that might be the case?
My personal opinion, and this is just obviously from watching her interviews, is I think she's definitely hiding some things. Now, maybe it's just knowledge about what happened. Maybe it's concerned that her boyfriend's going to get in trouble, which, too late for that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it means that she's involved in the murder directly. It could be, but I think it's more that she definitely knows more than she's saying there. And I think that does come across to me. At least about what happened here.
Thank you. Dr. Joni Johnston is wonderful human being. She also studies serial killers, so watch out. She's a private investigator. She does it all. Dr. Joni, I know you have to run, but appreciate you being here very much. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure as always. Thank you.
All right. See you soon, Dr. Joni. So Dr. G, I'm just going to play this one more time for you and Susan. And she does, as I said, appear incredibly disconnected here, but let's give it one more watch.
She was spotted walking by the church, by the middle school on the cameras. They saw her hang out in the parking lot for a little bit and then get up and leave. They didn't see a vehicle or anything else. They just saw her walk away around 9 a.m. heading towards the school, but she never made it.
What has the school said? Have you given in contact with the school?
Yes, that they're doing everything they can. They've given me all their resources. The principals called me. They've looked at their cameras. I don't think they've caught anything on the cameras is too far away from the sidewalk. Everything is too grainy, so they can't see specific faces. But they've looked. I'm just waiting to hear anything else from them.
Is this normal behavior?
Not
to
at all.
just not show up or call or text or anything?
Not at all.
So Dr. G, your read on this.
obviously there's a disconnect emotionally. We would think that somebody who is dealing with this situation would show something a little bit different. And I think it makes us all uncomfortable because you watch this and it just doesn't quite feel right. But in terms of the specific things we notice body language wise, she did withdraw her lips at one point. We oftentimes think about that as, or at least I think about that as somebody trying not to say something. Sometimes it can be a way to comfort ourselves because our lips have lots of nerves in them. So when we do that, it can be a way to feel calmer or pacify ourselves. Sometimes it's because there's things that we don't want to say. But it seems like she's just saying the things that she's been told, and in the sense that, like, I don't think she was forced to say these things. I just think that she's parroting what she's been told. Like, she didn't see the video, or she in the other interview, which at some point she makes mention of something to the fact, like, I was told that this was what was on the video. So she does acknowledge that she never actually saw the video of Madeline walking around. Obviously she didn't, because that doesn't exist. But I believe that she's just repeating things that she's been told and that she's heard. So she's just saying them in a matter-of-fact way, just trying to remember it all. One other thing I'll point out, though, she's not making much eye contact here, and I don't know if it's that she's uncomfortable with eye contact. I don't think that necessarily implies that she's lying, but you'll notice she looks down at first, then she looks at them for a second, then looks up. So she doesn't, it's very intense to look at people. And if she's somebody that's uncomfortable with that, this would be even more intense in this situation.
From Diana Beauchesne, Dr. G, the interview, and I don't think this is the one necessarily, but the interview where Mom Jennifer Soto looks like a deer in headlights makes me think she was forcing herself to say whatever her boyfriend told her to stay. We'll see another video where he's in the background. Do you get the sense that he was exerting power or controlling her in that way?
I get the impression that he's really good at manipulating her. I think that she really does believe him. I think she believes that he's upset and sad and that he's crying and that he needs to be comforted. I just don't think that I don't think she reads body language very well. I don't think that she can, obviously she wouldn't be with him if she sees the same things that we do, which is that this guy is somebody you can't trust. He's fake. He's inauthentic. I would presume that she probably wouldn't want to be around him if she could see those things. So she just may not be able to identify that stuff. So I don't think that it was due to threats or that she felt intimidated into it per se, but maybe. But I think it's more likely that she just believes him without question.
Susan, what do you make of this clip?
What I see in here is I see fear, because you can see her eyelids lifting up. You can see the 3/4 white. That's a fear response. Also, her mouth is dry. That's also part of the fear response. Her eyes get very wide. That's that like the deer in headlights look that you're talking about. That is a fear response. Then you listen to her tone, and she was saying, about the video, and it was just kind of grainy. I feel like there's a part of that she's almost trying to give us an impression that there's no way you're going to be able to find any information, because we've seen that throughout, like with her phone, and then with the graininess of the other video. There was nothing, you couldn't identify her, and she had ADD and her phone was missing. And so she was giving all of these reasons. And it's like, anytime a person is giving you too much information, it's always usually a red flag for me if it doesn't add to the story. But to Dr. G's point about the breaking eye contact, she goes into internal processing, and that's where she's looking down. And then you have to look at, when does she look up? Okay. At what moment does she do this? She goes from processing to her eyes up to not necessarily convincing, but there's a part of that she's trying to convey some information to the reporter. Then she kind of tails off. She does a lot, almost at every one of her sentences. She goes, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, like that. And you see a shoulder shrug. So usually that's associated with deception. You look for these little leakages of micro shoulder shrugs right at that time. And we know Ekman's work is pretty, conclusive with that. And we're looking for those little form of opposite meaning. So anyways, when I'm looking, see what she just did it there, right there. Unless she said, I don't know. She said, I don't know, then that would be consistent. But see, she's doing these micro shoulder shrugs a lot.
That's super fascinating. I would never, ever notice that, but I do see it when you're describing it here. From Ned Smith, big friend of the show, back to Susan. Would Madeline not tell anyone, even like a close friend? I saw another comment of someone who experienced SA and said they never told anyone and they went on to lead a happy, productive life. But is it possible she just didn't say a word to anyone about this, Susan?
It's possible. I mean, anything is possible. We don't know what it was like inside that home. We don't know if, I mean, I have a hard time believing that she is so naive that she didn't pick up any clues, like with him looking at her or wanting to spend alone time with her, or just in phraseology or connecting language or something would raise some sort of red flag. And you know, all moms, we have an innate ability to pick up those things. It's like intuition. And not only that, you know, I would sit there and go, what was their sex life like? You know, I'd be kind of going back into that, right? So what was their sex life? Because we know that predators, it's like they have a du jour. They have a certain age group that they like, and they don't vary from that. So if they're liking the 13-year-olds, he's probably not doing too much over here. That to me would be a red flag.
Dr. G, I just noticed that silver play button of yours right over your right shoulder. Just put mine up, and Dr. G and I both happy to have those. So kudos to you, Dr. G. Reality wins. This was premeditated. Maddie was going to turn them in. Yes, both of them. Obviously, this is speculation, but Dr. G, do you have a theory? I was asking the detective, do you think that this was a premeditated murder or a murder in the throes of some sort of, you know, passion or spur of the moment type thing? What is your theory as to how this all went down?
I think this was impulsive. That's what I think, because Stephan Sterns, the way that he talks about it, there were some of the, I can't even remember off the top of my head right now, but some of the details made it sound like this was something that was not planned, that it was off the cuff. I think that when he is flexing his hands in this interview where he's sitting behind her, I think there's a lot of anger and aggression there. I mean, I think that maybe he strangled her or something like that. I mean, that's purely speculative. That's just that would be my guess. But yeah, I think that this was impulsive. I don't think that he had planned to do this.
But any idea what created that impulsive reaction?
I presume something related to the abuse that was going on, but as far as what? Like that it's possible
she was going to out him or something?
Mm-hmm. Who knows? Maybe she said she would. Who knows? Maybe it was some sort of threat. But yeah, it would something that would impulsively make him so angry that he would have done that. So because I just can't imagine that being that this was all planned in this way. It's possible, but it doesn't make much sense.
By the way, this comment struck me. Hey, Mona, SA is recoverable with therapy and hard work. Big shout out to Carm today. We got through the audio recording of our entire book, and obviously it was a chance to read it. And really the big reason I wrote it is not only is my mom an inspiration to me, but I do think she's an inspiration to the entire world, because she went through the worst of the worst. Watched her father get taken away from her right in front of her eyes, only to find out that he was gassed in Auschwitz. How she responded to that. She lost a child. She just lost her husband of 63 years. And you know what? She's the most positive, most strong person that I know. So at the very least, I think it is a book of inspiration. And I think it's a very important story. I'm happy I wrote it, and I'm super happy that Carm, this was tough. This was really tough. We spent, I think, close to 16 or 20 hours recording this book. And it's, I think it is a story for everybody in STS Nation who is struggling. My mom always says, she's always said, we're all just trying to survive in a rough world. And she is inspirational to me to see how she's been able to keep moving forward. And she admits the hardest thing in her life, and everyone has different challenges, but the hardest thing for her, whether it's SA for a young child, but for my mom, it was losing my dad, who she was with, inseparable. They were inseparable for 63 years. And when she tells you that, and you hear that she lost a child, and that her dad was gassed, you're like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. By the way, Carm is here. This is a quick thing. I'm just going to play this, and we'll have Dr. G study the body language. I didn't know she was in here.
STS family, this is Carmela from the House of Hits, where we are recording the audible version of the book. And we just found out that you can get a signed, personalized hard copy of the book from signedsurvivorbook.com. Signedsurvivorbook.com. Hi,
Dr. G, what's going on in this body
This is
language?
Carmela
Her shoulders are
from
slumping.
the House of Hits,
Sure, but we're seeing a lot of
where we are
confidence.
recording the audible version of the book.
It's all good.
She looks confident to you?
Yeah, she's not, when people get uncomfortable, in all seriousness, when people get uncomfortable, they tend to cover their bodies a little bit. They don't tend to be as open. So yeah, she's vulnerable and open right now.
She's telling everybody I forced her. We've got signed hardcover copies of the book. Susan
Hits,
Constantine, you want to weigh in on this body language?
Audible version of the book, and we just found out that you can get a signed.
I had the opportunity of meeting your mom, so that I probably got a little head start. So she's full of I call it piss and vinegar. I love her. She's just amazing. She's great. Anyway, I think that what she was doing there, she had an open body language, but she was concentrating and trying to read those words. So her eyes were kind of squinting, so she was trying to read whatever it was in front of her. So that was concentration. But that's your mom. You have to be around her long enough to know that she is a lovely person. And you could, and I told her one day, I said, I just love you. You're such a wonderful person. She goes, I'm not so nice. I'm really not so nice. Yes, you are. Oh, we have a lot of laughs.
That's a classic line from my mom. So this is a couple more clips here. This one is Jennifer Soto now with Stephan Sterns behind her. And Carm will write curse words for you if you go to signedsurvivorbook.com, even though she the whole time we're recording this, she's like, I'm not saying that word. I'm like, you said it. I recorded it. She's like, I'm not. So she'd have to stop and think of a different word. She started using feces a lot, which I told her didn't work. Nina Stanek, Dr. G, do you think there's a possibility the mom was actively involved in the essay and selling pictures, video to others, like the business manager? Whoa, that's a heavy claim to make. Dr. G, did you notice the three whites of her eyes? Those two questions, Dr. G.
So as far as her managing this stuff, first of all, I think she'd be arrested right now if they had any indication that was the case. They arrested him very quickly on those charges. If she was somehow the third party involved in that, I suppose it's possible they'd be waiting, but that would be so horrific. It's hard. That would be so horrific. It's hard to imagine. Possible, of course, but my God, I would have really, it's almost unfathomable that that's the case. Nothing's impossible, I suppose, but I hadn't considered that possibility. So I hope that's unlikely. I really do. As far as the seeing the three whites of the eyes, it's interesting. There's some people refer to this as, I don't know much about this, but people refer to it as sampaku eyes or something like that. Like people have sort of small irises and their eyes open really wide. It seems that she does that quite often, where you can see the whites of her eyes. She just so I think Susan already spoke to that earlier, actually.
Karen Wagner here. Why is the mom never showing her picture? That's another sort of interesting take. A lot of times when we see these situations, the mother is holding up a picture. Sarah Adams with a comment about Carm. This is the video now of Jennifer Soto with the boyfriend in the background. Let's watch together.
Gotten into a fight in like a few weeks, or arguments or anything like that. If anything, on Sunday, she celebrated her 13th birthday with my entire family, and she had the best day. She was so happy. She showed us all her gifts. She's just a happy girl, and she showed it on Sunday night when she went to bed. She was so happy. So, she had the best day. There was no moment in that evening from when she got home from the party that she had her phone or had the laptop. She went straight to getting ready and went to bed. So I know she didn't have any conversations with anyone. She didn't make plans with anyone. I didn't see any of that.
Dr. G, I said this earlier.
Gotten into a fight and
I was going to play the video. He looks like a bouncer at the bar. I think he's got a vape cartridge in his hand, but he looks like the guy at the door. Looking over her shoulder, but she also looks much more animated to me here than she does in the other clip. A little more, I don't know, confident, put together. How do you read this?
I read it similarly in the sense that I'm not sure he knew he was in frame, actually. I'm kind of curious if he thought he was just sitting back there and looking over her shoulder. He may not have actually realized he was on film. But yeah, his body's a bit more imposing. His arms are out at times where he seems like he's taking up more space. He's being a little bit intense. I hate it when people sit behind me. So the idea that he's sitting back there would be uncomfortable. That would drive me nuts if somebody was sort of hovering like that. So I do think that he's an intimidating presence, and I think he wants. And this is why another reason I think that they might not both be involved. I think he wants to make sure he's keeping track of everything that she's saying. That he wants to know to make sure that all the stories are consistent. And I noticed that there were some of the details that she provided that I actually think lend credence to the fact that she's not involved. Another part of the reason that I came to that conclusion when she's giving details about what happened that night and she wasn't on her phone or her computer, she's providing more information that might contradict itself. And oftentimes, like with him, they would ask him questions very directly and he would just sort of give these vague, nebulous answers. She provides sometimes odd details, like some about her leaving her phone at home, but at times the details she provides seem fairly natural.
Susan, I'm gonna unmute you here. I think you are. Oh no, let me unmute you. But what about this? Dr. G says he hates when someone sits behind him. We don't know if he knew that he was in frame, but he does look like he's got this. He's hovering over her, very kind of controlling in that way. When you watch this, what do you see other than the giant Fox 35 Orlando bug, as they call it on the top?
Oh, no. Well, let's back up before that. What you didn't see was him coming in the room and banging things around. So he was making his presence known. I don't know if he was irritated, but I think people do that when they're anxious, and that's out of nervousness. So they call manipulators. They organize things around the house or fix things or busy themselves with their hands or something. I saw him doing that. He looks like a watchman to me. And so he has this very stalker type aggression. And Dr. G, and I saw your video, by the way. I thought you did a phenomenal job. Thank you so much. And I think you were spot on. And when I was watching him, he's in this frozen state, right? So he's watching her. He's watching her to see what she knows and what she's going to see. I think what she has an issue with is a guilty fear. There is like, she's missing. She had a great time at the party. I also think that she is parroting what she heard from somebody else, because remember, she wasn't there. So when her eyes kind of squinted, she goes, she really had a good time. How would she know? That's focus. When you're focusing in like a lens, it means you're recalling something you saw. She didn't. She did it in because it was a sense of doubt. Like, well, that's kind of like what everybody told me, a snapshot. So I see that as parroting language. And also, too, at the very beginning, when she's talking about we and then I think that she's doing that to protect him, because she doesn't want to bring attention to him, because she probably believes he had nothing to do with, doesn't want to believe he had anything to do with it. So I feel like she is protecting him. I think that is, but she truly is protecting him. I said, why is mom having agitation? There's something to do with the birthday party. Something ensued there. There was some sort of family dynamics, because when you looking into statement analysis, you have to think about what's the first thing that comes out of their mouths. That they're talking about the birthday party is the main thing. So usually the event of the murder had something to do with that birthday party, right, Dr. G?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think, yeah, I would tend to agree with that myself. Here's another clip with the boyfriend in the back. I think we have two more actually. So let's play this one and then we'll begin to wrap it up.
I'm trying to hope for the best, but I'm scared for her. I want her to be okay, and I want her to be safe. I don't want her to come back harmed. I just want her back, whatever that means. I just want her back.
Dr. G, she seems a little like she's feigning it there, faking it a bit. That's just me. And at the very end, it's like this high-pitched appeal. We want her back. To me, it seems like she knows more than she's letting on.
The weirdest part of this interview, in my opinion. It is the way that she phrases it, we want her back, whatever that means. So I don't know if she believed that she was dead at this point and she just assumed that was the case. As far as the crying goes, let me see. I'm gonna let this play for a second.
Let me play it out again. I'm sorry. I'll play it one more time.
I wonder. I'm trying to hope for the best, but I'm scared for her. I want her to be okay, and I want her to be safe. I don't want her to come back harmed. I just want her back, whatever that means. I just want her back.
I mean, that part, Dr. G, whatever that means. And she starts off at a totally normal tone and goes up like 19 octaves.
Yeah, there's some of the ways that her face looks that she's just awkward. That's part of the challenge with this is I'm not certain that that's inauthentic. Some of it seems kind of right, but some of it doesn't. And that's what I have a hard time with when it comes to reading her is that her expression is unusual. But it like I said, if she was going to fake it, why she didn't do it more though? That's what gets me. The first interview she didn't do it at all, and this it was only brief. Like I'm not certain that this was a fake emotion, even though it looks a little bit strange, even though it feels a little bit awkward. The timing when it would make more sense for her to do it at other times, she didn't do. So these are strange interviews.
Yeah, for sure. Susan, how do you read this one?
Well, to Dr. G's point, what I'm seeing is duration of emotion, stop, start, onset, offset. So when we see people that are in an emotional state, there is a kind of moving up into it, and then there's a kind of a peak to it, and then it slowly kind of wanes itself off. So, and then when it starts to wane itself off, her voice pitch raises. Now, when you're under a lot of stress, women's voices will, especially when they cry, when they're under a lot of anxiousness, you'll see this. Again, I want her back, whatever that means. There were so many clues that give indications that she believes she was dead. Like she uses the word taken. Nobody uses the word taken. I think she was taken, and she arbitrarily throws it up there as if she's giving you a reason why she's missing. It makes no sense to me. But if one of the clips you missed here, I wish we had it. When you watch her as she's talking about what happens, you'll watch his body language when it says the reporter says, "Has she ever threatened to run away?" And then you'll see him scratching his face. You know, you watch his behavior, then look at the video and then back it up and see what she said, because you can tie it into that he feels guilt. You can see it. You can see the fear responses, the cracking the knuckles, which has to do with tension. And, you know, when you're under a lot of stress and tension, you crack your knuckles and break up that lactic acid. And Dr. G nailed that about the aggression, right? The anger, all of that there. Lots of bizarre behavior. Language is off. The tone is off. He's off. And I guess we're going to find out soon what really happened to Madeline Soto.
And Victor Polanco, Susan, is there a possibility that the police will interview Jen Soto with a polygrapher? You think that could happen?
I really hope they do. In fact, what the sheriff doesn't know, Sheriff of Orange County, I just want to let you know that my team and I are going to be delivering to your office a full report on the behaviors, the statement, and the voice stress analysis. We're doing this because we want to see something happening in this case and find out who's really involved of what happened to Madeline Soto.
Wow. So your team put together an analysis, and when do you guys plan to present that to the Orange County Sheriff?
As soon as they give it to me, I would say by tomorrow, the following day. I've already most of the statement analysis. I'm waiting for the voice stress to come in. So just so you know what we do here, and I think you do this yourself, I'm sure, Dr. G, we do a 3-prong test. So when we see things like that, we've got a great video. This is like candy in a candy store. We've got the language, right? We can transcribe all of that stuff and see this is kind of part of statement analysis. And then we have voice stress analyzers. So we have Deceptio AI. We have lots of tools we can use. We can tell in an instant where there's deception and where there's not, and where they rank in the deception scale. And when you do the 3-prong test, if somebody is being deceptive, you see it in their body language, you're going to more than likely hear it in the tone of voice, and you're going to see it in their language. It all ties together because we are multi-channel communicators.
Susan, I'd love to get you back on with your team once you present this, and especially if you hear back. So we'll try to get Susan back on, but that's pretty wild. You're hearing it here on STS that they're going to present this to the Orange County Sheriff's Office, their findings from their behavior analysis of Jennifer Soto. Here's the final clip. We'll get some final thoughts and wrap this bad boy, but bad girl up. Here we go.
School. We dropped her off close to school, across the street from a church, which is it's right next to the school. She crossed the street and walked to school, what we thought walked to school. My boyfriend who drove her to school drove away at that point. It was seen on video footage that she hung out in the parking lot of the church for a few minutes and then got up and walked towards the school. But she never made it that walk and that was around 9 a.m. when she got up. She never made it to school after that. It's right next to the school. I don't know why she didn't make it. I don't know if something happened on
right there.
her walk along the way or if she got taken, but she never made it.
Susan, tell me what I'm going to go back on this. Let me take it back and tell us what we're about to see.
Yep.
But she never made it.
She never made it.
Walk and that was around 9 footage that she hung out in the parking lot of the church for a few minutes and then got up and walked towards the school. But she never made it that walk from.
What is that telling you, Susan?
You missed it. There was a part where have to go to the frame where we don't know what happened. I can't remember the words because I don't.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back, and you just tell us when we're there, and I can stop it.
Once it comes in, I'll
she crossed the street, and walked to school. What we thought walked to school. My boyfriend who drove her to school drove away at that point. It was seen on video footage that she hung out in the parking lot of the church for a few minutes and then got up and walked towards the school. But she never made it that walk and that was around 9 a.m. when she got up. She never made it to school after that. It's right next to the school. I don't know why she didn't make it. I don't know if something happened on.
I don't know. He didn't make it. And then he goes and he puts his head down and then he kind of scratches his head. So you have to look at how things sync together. And it was very revealing because if you watch his behavior, you start to see a shift in his behavior at certain moments. To me, that was very telling.
And when she said that, one of the things I pay a lot of attention to people's eyebrows. And so when she said, yeah, right there, the eyebrows are going up. We're trying to draw attention to our face when we do that. So she's saying, like, I don't know why she didn't make it. That's why I think that she really doesn't know why she didn't make it there. I really do. So
I think you're right. And I think she's really is covering for him. She doesn't want to tell on him. She doesn't want to set him up because she doesn't want to believe that he was involved.
Mm-hmm.
And Susan, you're saying, just so I understand this right, and I'm going to play it again, that he's reacting at that moment to what she's saying. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
All right,
so let me back up. That's the stimulus. What you have to look for is when you see a shift in behavior, you have to tie it to a stimulus. The stimulus is what she just said, and you can watch it right there. Watch it.
Yeah, here we go. This is really interesting. Here we go. Oh.
To school. My boyfriend who drove her to school drove away at that point. It was seen on video footage that she hung out in the parking lot of the church for a few minutes and then got up and walked towards the school. But she never made it that walk and that was around 9 a.m. when she got up. She never made it to school after that. It's right next to the school. I don't know why she didn't make it. I don't know if something happened on
right there,
walk along the way.
Right there. I don't know why, she says, and he puts his head in his hands.
Exactly. You got it. To school. See, there was a shift in his baseline energy. You could see where he was kind of frozen in space and he wasn't moving. And then when she says, I don't know why, but he does. He knows because he was the one that took her.
Wow. So, and you can see this. Watch him put his head in his hands right here.
That walk and that was around 9 a.m. when she got up. She never made it to school after that.
Right here.
Right next to the school. I don't know why she didn't make it. I don't know if something happened
Boom, guilty.
Or walk along the way, or she
slam dunk Shaquille O'Neal moment.
Swifter, poor attempt at manipulating the sequences of events and keeping anyone from deviating from planned lies. Poor attempts to follow Stephan's made-up storyline. They're horrible actors and storytellers. Dr. G, that last clip, do you agree with Susan that he is, I don't know, he's a made man at that point? He basically is putting his head in his hands.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. That was everything that we do, but that's part of the reason we can analyze body language. Everything is a reaction to something. Like nothing's accidental that we're doing right now. So the idea that he's reacting to that is pretty clear. It's so yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Dr. G, why lie about what you don't need to lie about? Why do people do that?
I think what you're talking about, like what things that she has said, basically.
Yeah, he or she or people in general.
Whether or not, if she intentionally lied, then she would certainly have reasons for doing so. So obviously, whether it's to help somebody else or to cover up something that she's involved with or whatever, I'm not certain that she's intentionally lied at this point because we're getting a lot of secondhand information. So we haven't seen any direct lies in her interviews that I'm aware of. So I can't say that she's lying at this point or intentionally lying.
By the way, there is a ton of speculation out there about what was happening to Maddie, what wasn't happening, and I just don't want to go down that road out of respect to her biological father, Tyler Wallace. I think people know what I'm talking about, but we just don't know what we don't know. And look at this. Rebecca says, interesting clips, even if the clips are old. They're not that old, but these are really the only clips we have of them.
That's true. Crime Free. After 2 days, stuff's old.
I'm taking the heat already. Fleur de lis here. So another really amazing panel here. Like I say, best guess. It's not just a tagline. It is our reality. Susan Constantine is one of the nation's leading jury consultants. She also is a body language and communication expert. She's the owner of the Human Behavior Lab. She's been on Dateline, The Today Show, Fox and Friends. The list goes on. And as you just heard, she's presenting her team's findings to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Susan, how long have you been working on that? And what do you hope to gain from giving it to them? Do you just want to push this case forward?
Insights. It's all intel. It just gives them, it leads them, it shows them where she and he may be omitting information. We know that with statement analysis. And then it's supported by voice stress analysis. And then the behavior, pointing out the clues that we see and how it all ties together. And so it's just going to give them some information to guide them, whether they want to use it as intel. And we started right when it went on. I mean, immediately within 1 hour, I already called one of my guys and said, Bob, you got to start pulling up some statement analysis. Look at this video. Before he knew it went viral. So we're all, feverishly working to get this thing done. It's a lot of work when you look at statement analysis. It's a very complex, you can see kind of, analysis where we're drawing correlations. It's like almost like a crime scene on paper.
Wow. Super fascinating to me as the son of a psychiatrist and a licensed therapist. So Cape Breton drone pilot, very insightful panel. I love this channel, love the panel. Shout out to Dr. Joni Johnston for joining for the first hour. And then, of course, Dr. J.P. Garrison, he earned his PsyD in clinical psychology. He also has an MBA. He also studied South Korean culture for over a decade. And he also hosts one of the more popular true crime YouTube channels, Dr. G Explains. Right here, Dr. G is my favorite. If you haven't subscribed to Dr. G Explains, you are missing out. Dr. G, your final thoughts on this heavy day with this very heavy story, hoping that we get some more answers. But what are your concluding thoughts?
my final thoughts are that I think I want the exact same thing that everybody else wants, which is justice in this situation. I'm not convinced that the mom was involved with this, but I'm also open to being wrong about that. I mean, there is interpretation involved when it comes to reading body language and analyzing all of this stuff. And if it turns out that she is an absolute monster and did some of the things, the more unsavory things people are suggesting, I'll be the first to get on here and talk about that too. But I do think that the oddness of her body language, some of the stranger things we're seeing, could very well, there may be other things that explain that, and time will tell.
Time will certainly tell. I am surprised as a former news guy that it's been this quiet for so many days, but back tomorrow, Tim Jansen and David Nutting, who's a retired detective out of Orlando, will get back into where this investigation is likely now and where it's headed, along with questions like, is the mother going to be brought in for a polygraph examination? So we will have to wait and see about all that. But 2 shows tomorrow at 5 and 7 p.m. 5 is Maddie Soto. 7 o'clock, Scott Peterson goes before a judge tomorrow after all this time, part of it on death row, to try to reclaim his innocence. That is a huge uphill battle, but we'll cover both those stories tomorrow. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Atlanta, Georgia. Love you, San Diego, where Dr. Joni is. And, of course, Orlando, the scene of this horrific crime, happens to be where Susan Constantine is as well. Justice for Maddie Soto. See you tomorrow.